They say every village carries its own legend, some old tale whispered in hushed tones over late-night drinks. But no story in my hometown, nestled deep in the countryside, ever chilled me quite like the tale of the old windmill at the edge of Grey Hollow. A crumbling, skeletal structure, long abandoned, with weathered blades that hadn't turned in decades. And yet, on certain nights, people swore they heard the windmill creaking, as though grinding unseen grains. I remember that night vividly, the night we truly found out why. The autumn air was unnaturally still, cold enough to sting, and the sky bled a deep crimson hue. David, my childhood friend, had always been the daredevil. "Let's go see if the stories are true," he had grinned, half drunk, challenging the rest of us. There was a heavy silence among us, but pride got the better of reason. None of us wanted to be the coward. We gathered flashlights, half laughing at our own nervousness, and set off toward that decaying relic. Grey Hollow itself felt different that night. The birds had fallen silent, and not a single cricket dared sing. The path to the mill was lined with tall, skeletal trees, their bare branches clawing at the sky like the fingers of the dead. Every step felt heavier, every breath harder, like the air itself resisted our presence. I remember catching Laura's eyes, wide, darting, desperate to turn back. But like the rest of us, she said nothing. When the mill came into view, the world seemed to stop, towering, broken, and impossibly dark against the blood-red sky. Its blades hung limp, swaying unnaturally despite the still air. A sound, a faint, rhythmic creak, floated toward us. We froze. David chuckled nervously. "It's just the wood shifting." But even he didn't believe it. "Come on," he added, leading us through the rotting fence and up to the door. The door was strangely intact, heavy and soaked with years of moisture, but it creaked open with an unsettling ease. A wave of rot and mildew smacked us in the face. The air inside was damp and suffocating, carrying with it a strange metallic scent. Our flashlights flickered as if the very darkness swallowed the light. Cobwebs hung like curtains, thick and clinging, forcing us to brush them aside with trembling hands. The interior was worse than I imagined. Broken machinery, rusted gears, and tattered sacks of mouldy grain scattered like forgotten corpses. And then, that sound again, a low grinding, deep within the walls. Laura gasped audibly, clutching my arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, barely audible. We all heard it. Something was moving, not above, not outside, but inside the walls. David, too stubborn to show fear, pushed forward. "It's rats!" he spat, his voice shaky. But we knew better. No rat made that sound. Our lights caught the staircase leading to the upper level, narrow and half-rotted. "Up there," David dared, already placing his foot on the first step. The wood groaned beneath his weight. We followed, step by terrified step, each creak of the stairs sending shivers through us. The higher we climbed, the colder it got, and the grinding grew louder. By the time we reached the top, every instinct screamed to flee. But curiosity, or pride, kept us there, and then we saw it. In the center of the floor, the grinding wheel turned, slowly, methodically, grinding nothing but air. "That's impossible," Laura whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The wheel was massive, its wooden grooves splintered but smooth from years of use. There were no gears, no ropes, nothing to make it move. Yet there it was, spinning, creaking like the whispers of the dead. Then we heard the voices, low, indistinct, but undeniably human. They circled us, coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. David's face drained of colour. "We need to go," he croaked. But when he turned toward the stairs, they were gone. Nothing but a blank, rotted wall. Laura screamed. I grabbed her, my own breath shallow. There was no way out. The walls groaned, the air thickening, pressing against our chests. The wheel spun faster now, and from its center we saw it, a pale, withered face staring at us. Eyes hollow, mouth twisted in agony. Another appeared, and another. Faces ground into the very wood, their silent screams begging for release. "We have to stop it," I shouted, grabbing a rusted pipe and swinging it at the wheel. It passed right through. David tried next, kicking it with all his might, but the wheel didn't even flinch. Laura sobbed. "We're not supposed to be here. We woke them up." The whispers grew louder until they became deafening screams. The entire mill shook violently, dust and debris falling around us. We huddled together, praying it would stop. The faces in the wheel multiplied, their mouths opening wider until it felt like they might consume us whole. And then, as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The wheel ceased turning. The screams silenced. We opened our eyes to find the staircase back in place, the door ajar, moonlight pouring in. Without a word we ran, tripping, falling, scrambling over each other to get out. Not once did we look back. We never spoke of that night again. Weeks passed, and David stopped coming around. Laura moved away. I stayed, but the sound of grinding haunted me. On still nights, I swear I can hear it, faint and taunting. They say the mill was built over an old burial ground, the bones of the restless ground into the wood, feeding the cursed wheel. Years later, the mill finally collapsed, burned to the ground during a freak lightning storm. Some called it an accident. Others said it was the souls finally freed. But I know better. Sometimes late at night, when the wind howls just right, I still hear the wheel turning. I still don't know what made me agree to visit the old watermill that night. Maybe it was the way Eric talked about it, like the place held secrets too dark to be left untold. We were both in our mid-40s, not kids looking for cheap thrills, but the way he leaned forward, lowering his voice, made my skin prickle. "They say the old Merrick Mill is cursed, Rob," he had whispered, his eyes darting around the dim pub as if afraid someone might hear. "That place, it's not just abandoned, it's alive." The rain came hard that night, drumming against the windshield as we drove down those narrow country roads. My gut screamed to turn back, but pride wouldn't let me. The mill sat hidden in a clearing, its stone walls dark and crumbling, the giant wheel still, almost forgotten by time. But something about it, it felt like it was waiting. I remember swallowing hard as we killed the headlights. "Jesus, Eric," I muttered. "What the hell are we even doing here?" We crept closer, the sound of rushing water faint beneath the rain. Eric flashed his torch around, catching glimpses of rotting wood, rusted metal, and shards of shattered windows. "My grandfather worked here," he murmured. "Told me things you wouldn't believe." The air grew colder the moment we stepped inside. Dampness clung to my skin, and the sharp smell of mold made me gag. The floorboards groaned beneath our feet, the walls lined with old gears and machinery long seized by time. But there was a noise, a low creaking like the mill wheel turning slowly in the dark, though we both knew it wasn't moving. Eric's face paled. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "Swear to God, Rob, the wheel's moving." We pushed deeper, our torches barely piercing the heavy darkness. Eric led us to the grinding room, where the great stone wheels once crushed grain. They were still there, covered in thick layers of dust, but as the torchlight hit them, I froze. Fingerprints, fresh ones, long thin streaks trailing across the surface. "No one's been here for years," Eric hissed. "Who the hell?" A loud metallic clang echoed above us, making me jump. We whipped our lights upward but saw nothing. Still, I could have sworn I heard breathing. Close. Wet, ragged breathing. As if someone, or something, was waiting in the shadows. Our lights danced along the walls, illuminating old burlap sacks split open, spilling blackened remnants of grain. Faint claw marks slashed across the wood, deep and deliberate. My stomach twisted. "Why the hell would anyone?" I muttered, but the words died in my throat. "We should go," I muttered. Eric ignored me, his face tight with something between fear and obsession. No, there's more. My grandfather said it feeds off fear. He said people disappeared here, the ones who got too curious. The rain hammered harder, but the sound of it vanished as we stepped into the basement. It was darker here, suffocating. The walls wept moisture, and the air tasted of rot. A strange sound rose from the far corner. A soft grinding, slow, methodical. "What is that?" I whispered. Eric shined his light, and there it was. The grindstone turning slowly, impossibly. Nobody was touching it. We stood frozen, disbelief washing over us. Another sound, faint but deliberate, made my hair stand on end. A child's giggle. Distant, echoing through the stone. "Eric, did you hear that?" I gasped. He nodded, his lips trembling. "I told you," he whispered. "They never left." Suddenly, another whisper joined. This time a woman's voice, brittle and cracked. "You shouldn't be here." The air grew colder still, and shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Suddenly the room felt smaller, the air thick. Eric's torch flickered and died. No, not now," he stammered, fumbling for batteries. I heard it then. A voice. Low, hoarse, barely a whisper. "Feed me." "Did you hear that?" I gasped, my own voice trembling. Eric nodded, his face pale as death. Something cold brushed past me and I stumbled back. "We need to get out," I said. "Now." We turned to leave, but the staircase looked longer, darker. Shadows shifted, forming shapes too grotesque to name. Faces, hollow-eyed, mouths stretched wide in silent screams. "God, oh God," Eric gasped. "They're trapped." A sudden scraping sound made us freeze. We turned just as a pale hand clawed its way out from behind the grindstone, the fingernails blackened and broken. A face followed, hollow, eyeless, its mouth stretched open wider than humanly possible. "Stay!" it gurgled. We scrambled up the stairs, the creaking louder now, echoing through the mill like a death rattle. The machinery groaned, metal grinding against metal, though the place was long dead. "It's awake," Eric choked. "I told you, it's alive." Suddenly, a shape emerged from the dark, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that stared straight through us. "Run!" I shouted, dragging Eric by the arm. We bolted, tripping over debris, the shadow following, never gaining, never falling behind. It didn't need to. It just wanted us to know it was there. The exit was in sight, but the door slammed shut with a thunderous crack. I rammed my shoulder into it, screaming, "Open, damn it!" Behind us, the grinding grew louder, deafening, like the walls themselves were closing in. Then, the door creaked open slowly, as if letting us go was its decision. We burst into the night, gasping for air, but the rain felt colder, heavier. The mill loomed behind us, the wheel now turning slowly, groaning under its own weight. Eric collapsed to his knees, sobbing. He was right. My grandfather. They never left. I helped him up, my hands shaking. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The road back felt endless, the shadows never leaving us. Even now I hear the grinding in my dreams, the mill calling, waiting. And I know, someday I'll go back. Not because I want to, but because it won't let me stay away. If you ever drive down the forgotten countryside roads of northern England, there's a decaying windmill, barely standing against the weight of time, hidden behind a patch of dense, whispering trees. Most locals call it Hawthorne Mill, but avoid mentioning it when the sun dips below the horizon. Nobody dares get close, and the older folks, the ones with weathered faces and trembling hands, speak of it only in drunken murmurs. I wasn't from there, nor did I grow up with their tales. I was a freelance photographer, chasing stories. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to witness. I first heard about the mill during a casual pub conversation. An old man named Henry, face worn like the bark of an ancient tree, leaned in close and whispered, "They say the mill still turns at night, but there ain't no wind." He chuckled dryly, but his eyes, my God, his eyes weren't laughing. Bodies went missing back in '62. No one ever found them. That mill chews people up, son. I should have laughed it off. Should have. But I didn't. Instead, I felt that cold itch of curiosity crawl down my spine. That night, as I sat in my rented room, the old mill gnawed at my thoughts until sleep became impossible. The next morning, I set out with my camera gear and a ridiculous level of confidence. The locals watched me with pity and caution, like a man heading off to dig his own grave. The path leading to Hawthorne Mill was overgrown and suffocating. Trees bent unnaturally, their branches gnarled as if reaching out to stop me. A foul, damp smell rose from the earth as I walked, heavy enough to taste. And then I saw it. The mill was worse than I imagined. An enormous skeletal structure with faded red bricks and rotting wooden blades that looked ready to snap. But what struck me most was the silence. Not a single bird, not the rustling of leaves. Just a heavy, suffocating stillness. I forced a laugh to cut through my own fear. "It's just a building," I muttered. Yet the moment those words left my mouth, the giant wooden blades creaked, slow, deliberate, though the air around me was still. I shook it off and stepped inside, the floor groaning under my weight. The air was thick, filled with the sharp metallic stench of rust and something else, something sour. My flashlight beam flickered across ancient machinery, cobwebs like skeletal hands hanging low. My pulse quickened as I stumbled upon old tools scattered across the floor, hammers, blades, rusted chains. But what unsettled me most was the dried, dark stains coating the edges of the grinding stones. "Hello?" My voice cracked embarrassingly, echoing off the rotting walls. For a second I swore I heard a whisper, a wet, guttural voice that slithered just beneath hearing. I spun around, shining the light wildly, breath coming out ragged. "Who's there?" No answer, only the soft groan of the mill turning, though the outside wind was non-existent. My hands trembled as I raised the camera and snapped a few shots. The flash lit up the place for a heartbeat, and in that blink, I saw a shadow that hadn't been there before. Tall, thin, watching. The photographs on my camera screen were blurry. I cursed under my breath and wiped the lens. But something was wrong. Each photo, no matter how clear the shot, showed that figure, closer each time. My stomach knotted so hard it made me nauseous. "I'm leaving," I said out loud, almost pleading with the empty air. But the door I'd come through was no longer open. It stood shut, swollen from moisture, mocking me. Panic clawed up my throat. I rammed the door with my shoulder. Once, twice. The third time, the door gave way with a deafening crack, and I stumbled out into the grey daylight, gasping. I didn't stop running until I was back in the village. Faces stared as I burst into the pub, breathless and wild-eyed. Henry stood, face pale as bone. "You saw it, didn't you?" he whispered. "It follows. You should have never gone." I tried to sleep that night. I really did. But every time my eyes shut, I heard it. The slow, rhythmic grinding of the millstones. Louder, closer. The air in the room turned cold as frost. At exactly 3:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hands shaking, I answered. A voice, wet and raspy, slid through the speaker. "You left? But you belong to me now." I dropped the phone, my heart nearly exploding in my chest. Just then, the photos on my camera started deleting themselves, one by one. The screen flickered, and the last thing I saw was that tall shadow, grinning wide. I left the village before the sun rose, heart pounding like a drum. But it didn't matter. Every night, the grinding sound returns, in every place I stay, no matter how far. I see flashes of that cursed mill in my dreams, and worse, I see him, the figure in the shadow, watching, waiting. I told myself it wasn't real, just a story, a trick of the mind. But last week I woke up to find flowers scattered all over my bedroom floor, fresh, white, leading to my bed, and deep within it, a single bloody handprint. Desperate for answers, I reached out to a local historian. She agreed to meet me in a nearby town. Her name was Margaret, a frail woman with sunken eyes. She trembled as she read the mill's history. "It was a slaughterhouse out before it became a mill," she whispered. "The owner ground more than grain. Animals, people, whoever owed him. They say his soul's bound to the grindstone." Margaret showed me a black and white photo. My blood ran cold. The man in the photo, tall and thin, wore the same grin I'd seen on my camera. His name was Edwin Carrick. They hung him, but the body disappeared. Margaret grabbed my wrist, her nails biting into my skin. "If he marked you, he'll grind you down, piece by piece." Since then, the nightmares grew worse. One night I woke up gasping, my sheets damp with sweat and the overpowering smell of wet grain choking me. I stumbled toward the bathroom only to find the mirror fogged over, and scrawled across the glass, with something dark and dripping, were the words, "Turn the stone." That night, I heard footsteps in the hall, slow, heavy, grinding like stone on stone. I grabbed my camera and snapped wildly at the darkness. A flash, a glimpse, and there he was, standing inches away, mouth agape in a soundless scream. I dropped the camera and ran, but the sound of the grinding followed me, echoing through every street. In desperation, I returned to the mill. The air smelled of death and rot. I knew I couldn't escape unless I ended it. Inside, I found the main grindstone cracked open. Beneath it, bones, hundreds of them, crushed and yellow. My legs trembled as the shadow emerged, laughing low and deep. "Turn it," he hissed. "Finish what I started." With trembling hands, I pushed the grindstone. It shrieked, sending vibrations through my bones. Faces flashed in the dust. Men, women, children, their screams filling the air. I collapsed, weeping, and then silence. The shadow was gone. I don't know if it's over. Some nights, I wake to find my hands raw, bloodied as if I've been working the stone. I see faces in every reflection, and always that grinding sound somewhere far away. If you find yourself curious, wondering about the old mill, fight it. Curiosity is what feeds him. I know now the mill never needed wind to turn. It runs on souls.